The Unpaid Ledger. Episode 12. The Balance. Chapter 1. 2 days later. The Taurus smelled like old coffee in February. 4:30 in the morning, streetlights painting everything the color of weak tea, and I was driving east on Route 9 with a dead man in the passenger seat and a federal judge's home address written on the back of a gas station receipt. 2 days since the file. 2 days since we'd learned that Arthur Rhodes wrote case notes about children the way other people wrote grocery lists. 2 days since Derek had read every page and looked at me with eyes that said one thing while his mouth said another. April's briefing package sat in a manila envelope on the back seat. 43 pages. Cross-referenced. Indexed. The kind of document that would make a federal judge sit up straight and reach for a pen. April had delivered it to my office 6 hours ago. Dark circles under her eyes. Fingers still stained with printer ink. "It's clean," she'd said. "Every claim sourced. Every pattern documented. If Voss reads past page 3, she'll act. And if she doesn't read past page 3, then we're out of legal options, and Derek does whatever Derek's been planning to do." April had said it flat. No judgment, just arithmetic. She'd left without asking how I was doing. Good. I didn't have an answer she'd want to hear. Eddie flickered in the passenger seat. His form had been doing that more often since the voice. Not fading, exactly. More like a signal catching interference from a stronger broadcast. "You're quiet," I said. "I'm thinking." "You've been thinking for 2 days. It's been a productive 2 days." He stared out the window at nothing. The highway was empty. Just us and the occasional truck hauling something that didn't care about the hour. The presences are closer. A dozen of them now, maybe more. Moving up from the deep water. Toward you. Toward the shore. I just happened to be standing on it. He turned to look at me. Green dashboard glow. Sharp face. No joke loaded. The voice came again last night. My hands tightened on the wheel. "You didn't mention that. I'm mentioning it now." "What did it say?" Eddie was quiet for 3 beats of the turn signal. I'd forgotten to cancel it after the merge. "I don't know yet. It wasn't words. More like..." He trailed off. Frustrated. Eddie didn't do frustrated well. It came out as irritation. You know what a pipe organ sounds like when someone leans on the lowest key? That drone. Except it kept shifting pitch, like it was trying to find the right note to become a syllable. And underneath the drone, a rhythm. Not a heartbeat. Slower. Like breathing through water, directed at you. At me. At what the gray space is becoming. He looked back out the window. "I need more time with it. Time is the one thing we're short on." "Yeah." I noticed. The radio hummed. Low, constant. The frequency that had become background noise over the past week. Almost musical now. Almost something you could hum along to if you didn't think too hard about what was generating it. My phone buzzed. "Marcus." I picked up. Young man. His voice was steady. 4:30 in the morning, and Marcus sounded like he'd been awake for hours. Probably had been. The chalk signal was retrieved. "Miriam?" "Retrieved. But not the way she usually does it. Different approach angle, different timing. Could mean she's being more careful. Could mean someone else found it." "That's not reassuring, Marcus." "It wasn't meant to be. I've placed a secondary signal at the fallback. If it's her, she'll know to check." A pause. The sound of Marcus doing something with his hands. Folding paper, maybe. Building something. Derek checked in at midnight. Movement map is complete. Rhodes leaves his house at 7:15, arrives at the bureau at 7:40, eats lunch at his desk, leaves at 6:10. Every day. 23 years of the same routine. Derek say anything else? He said exactly what you'd want him to say. Marcus let that sit for a moment. His words were correct, Samuel. His tone was correct. But I've known Derek Wade for a long time, and there's a difference between a man who's waiting and a man who's decided he's done waiting. I know. Do you? Because if the judge moves, we have a path. If Derek moves first, we have a war. I know, Marcus. Then drive fast. He hung up. Eddie was watching me. Marcus is worried. Marcus is Marcus. He's 3 steps ahead, and 2 of those steps involve contingency plans for the contingency plans. He's worried about Derek. I didn't answer. The highway stretched out ahead, empty and dark, the dotted line disappearing under the hood in a rhythm that felt like counting down. Briarfield was 90 minutes east, a quiet town full of quiet money and people who'd earned the right to be left alone. Judge Eleanor Voss had retired there 11 years ago, 73 years old, last surviving member of the Bureau's Independent Oversight Board, our only legal option. Behind me, in the envelope, 43 pages that could end Arthur Rhodes or start something much worse. The radio hummed. Eddie flickered. The Taurus complained about third gear, same as always. 90 minutes to Briarfield, 2 days since the file. And somewhere in Ashford, Derek Wade was reading Rhodes' schedule one more time. Chapter 2. The Judge. Briarfield looked like a postcard someone had forgotten to send. Colonial houses with shutters that actually worked. Trees older than the town itself. The kind of place where people waved at cars they didn't recognize. Not because they were friendly, but because they wanted you to know they'd seen you. Judge Voss's house sat at the end of a dead-end street, a white colonial with a wraparound porch and a garden that had been put to bed for winter. Mulched. Covered. Everything in its place. The woman who lived here planned ahead. April met us in the driveway. She'd driven up separately, left before dawn, wanted to arrive first. Make sure the approach was clean. No surprises. She was standing by her car with her hands in her coat pockets, breath fogging in the cold. "She's expecting us," April said. "I called yesterday. Told her I was a researcher working on Bureau oversight history. She agreed to a meeting." "You lied to a federal judge." "I told her what she needed to hear to open the door. What happens after that is the truth." April's jaw was set. The eager researcher who'd asked too many questions was gone. Eddie drifted up the porch steps ahead of us, scouting. Old habit. He came back shaking his head. Just her. No staff, no visitors. 73, and she answers her own door. I knocked. Judge Eleanor Voss opened the door in 45 seconds. Not fast enough to suggest she'd been waiting by it. Not slow enough to suggest hesitation. She was smaller than I'd expected. 5'3" maybe. White hair pulled back. Reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She wore a cardigan over a button-down shirt, and her eyes were the sharpest thing in the room. "Mr. Vance. Miss Chin." She looked at us the way judges look at everyone. Measuring. Weighing. Deciding how much rope to give before pulling it taut. "Come in." The house was warm. Books everywhere. Not decorative books. The kind with cracked spines and dog-eared pages and sticky notes jutting out at angles. A working library. The study she led us to had a desk covered in legal pads and a window overlooking the dead garden. "You said you were researching Bureau oversight history." She settled into a leather chair that had molded to her shape over years. "I suspect that's not entirely accurate." "No, ma'am," April said. "Not entirely." "Then let's skip the part where you explain why you lied and get to the part where you tell me why you're actually here." Voss put on her reading glasses. "Ready?" I set the envelope on her desk. Arthur Rhodes, senior auditor, 23 years of service. 9 years ago, he reactivated a dormant bureau position called Special Assessor. Since then, he's authorized 23 placements targeting adjusters and their families. 5 of those targets are dead. 2 are documented in his own notes as terminated. Voss didn't open the envelope. She looked at me over her glasses. "He used a 9-year-old boy as a pressure point to force an adjuster back into compliance," I continued. "The boy died 6 months later. Rhodes filed it as a corrective action with a projected outcome. He's been refining his methods since, getting more precise, more surgical. And you're bringing this to me because? Because you're the only person who can freeze special assessor credentials without going through bureau channels, and bureau channels run through Rhodes." Voss picked up the envelope, opened it, read the first page, turned to the second. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. The same look I'd seen on April when she'd first cross-referenced the files. The look of someone who'd suspected something was broken and was now holding the X-ray. She read for 12 minutes. We sat in silence. April's leg bounced once, Twice. She stopped it. Voss turned a page, paused, went back, reread something. A reader, not a skimmer. This is thorough, Voss said finally, still reading, not looking up. April built it, I said. I can tell. It reads like a law clerk wrote it. Voss turned another page. The authorization codes. You verified these independently? Against personnel directories from 2 separate sources, April said, neither of which touches Bureau administrative systems. Rhodes can't see that we pulled them. Voss nodded. Read another page. Then she set the package down and took off her glasses. If I act on this, she said, what happens to the people Rhodes is currently managing? The question I hadn't prepared for. April shifted beside me. Active placements, Voss continued. If Rhodes has costs currently in motion, supervised transfers, ongoing pressure campaigns against adjusters, what happens when his credentials freeze? The placements don't evaporate. The costs don't resolve themselves. They snap back, or they drift, or they land on whoever's closest. She folded her glasses. You're asking me to pull the pin. I need to know what the blast radius looks like. We don't know, I said. Not precisely. Then find out. She stood up. I'm not saying no. I'm saying this is a 23-body problem, and I'm not adding to the count because someone was in a hurry. She walked us to the door. When you can tell me what happens to the active cases, call me. Cold air on the porch. April was already thinking. She's going to act, April said. She just needs to do it right. If Miriam surfaces with current bureau logs, I can build the active case analysis. 24 hours, maybe less. We walked to the cars. Briarfield was quiet around us. A dog barked somewhere. A garage door opened 3 houses down. Normal sounds in a normal town where a 73-year-old woman was about to read about a dead 9-year-old boy and decide how much of the bureau to tear apart. April. She stopped at her car door. You built something real in there. She respected it. She respected the evidence. I just organized it. April opened the door, then paused. Sam, whatever Derek's doing right now, whatever he's been building towards since he read that file, if it goes wrong before Voss moves, everything in that envelope becomes irrelevant. Evidence from a compromised source. Fruit of a poisoned tree. I know. Do you? Because I spent 48 hours building that package and I need it to matter. It matters. Then keep Derek on his leash. She got in her car, started the engine, pulled away without looking back. Eddie was leaning against the Taurus. She's not wrong. She's never wrong. That's becoming a problem. My phone buzzed. Text from a number I didn't recognize. Just coordinates. Then, 15 seconds later, from Derek's burner, found something. Come now. The coordinates were East Side, Warehouse District. 90 minutes back the way we'd come. I got in the Taurus. Eddie came through the door without opening it. The radio hummed. The frequency was louder here, away from the city. Or maybe the city had been masking it. Derek's been planning this since the file, Eddie said. Since before the file. The file just gave him a target. And you're going to talk him down. I'm going to try. That's reassuring. Eddie's voice was bone dry. The man who bench presses grief for a living is going to be reasoned with by a guy who drives a car that can't find third gear. I drove. 90 minutes of highway, the sun climbing behind a ceiling of gray cloud, the frequency humming in the radio like a second engine. Eddie didn't speak. I didn't need him to. The silence was its own conversation, the kind we'd been having for 7 years. Chapter 3. The Fuse. The warehouse was on Garfield, 3 blocks south of the rail yard. Old brick, old loading dock, the kind of building that had been a factory and then a storage facility and then nothing at all. The windows on the upper floors were painted over. The ones on the ground floor were boarded. Derek's truck was parked around back, tucked behind a dumpster where the streetlight didn't reach. Next to it, a sedan. Sensible. Brown. The kind of car a man in his 60s would drive to work every morning for 23 years. Mother of pearl, I said. He didn't, Eddie said. He did. I killed the headlights and parked. The loading dock was open. A rusted metal door rolled halfway up. Inside, Darkness, the smell of concrete dust and old machine oil, and the sound of two men breathing who weren't speaking to each other. A single fluorescent tube buzzed above the loading area, throwing thin blue light across a concrete floor stained with decades of use. I ducked under the door. Eddie came through the wall. The cold inside was different from the cold outside. Warehouse cold. The kind that lived in the concrete and never left. Derek was standing near the center of the warehouse floor, arms at his sides. His weight settled on both feet the way it always was when he was ready for something. He wore the same jacket he always wore. His face was calm, the dangerous kind. Arthur Rhodes sat in a metal folding chair 15 feet away, not tied, not restrained, just sitting. His brown suit was dusty at the knees, and his wire-rimmed glasses were slightly crooked. His briefcase sat on the concrete beside him, positioned precisely, the way a man positions things when he needs the world to be orderly. He didn't look afraid. He looked inconvenienced. Sam? Derek's voice was level. He was leaving the office. I showed him the file. He agreed to come. Agreed. I explained the alternative. Derek didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. He's been very cooperative. Rhodes looked at me, the same empty composure I remembered from our first meeting, the parking garage, the confrontation. But underneath it, something new. Awareness. He knew what I was. Mr. Vance. Rhodes's voice was dry, precise. The voice of a man who'd spent 30 years making paperwork sound reasonable. Your associate has been very thorough in his presentation. I've seen the files. My files, apparently, though I'm curious how you obtained them. Does it matter? Professionally, yes. Everything matters. Provenance, methodology, chain of custody. He adjusted his glasses. The gesture was practiced. Calming. A man putting his world back in order. But I suspect we're past professional courtesy. We were past it when you killed Michael Reeves. Rhodes's expression didn't change. Not a flicker. Michael Reeves was a corrective pressure point. Rhodes said it the way other people said, pass the salt. The placement was calculated. The outcome was within projected parameters. Derek's hands closed into fists, slowly. He was 9, Derek said. He was effective. Beck returned to compliance within 3 weeks. Rhodes folded his hands in his lap. You were a promising auditor, Mr. Wade. You chose sentiment over structure. You chose a child over paperwork. The system chose. Through me, there's a difference. The warehouse was quiet. Somewhere outside, a truck downshifted on the rail yard access road. The sound faded and left us in silence thick enough to feel. I stepped between them. Not because Derek needed restraining, because if I didn't change the geometry of the room, we were going to lose the only leverage we had, Rhodes. I waited until he looked at me. We have your complete file. Every placement. Every outcome. Every name. A federal judge has seen the package and she's preparing to act. Your special assessor credentials will be frozen within days. That's happening whether you cooperate or not. Something moved behind his eyes. The first crack. Not in his certainty. In his model of the situation. He'd calculated for bureau response, for internal investigation, for the normal channels he'd spent 23 years controlling. He hadn't calculated for a retired judge with independent authority. A federal judge, he repeated. Independent Oversight Board. The one you assumed was defunct. 2 of the 3 members are deceased. The third isn't. Rhodes was quiet for 4 seconds. Then he unfolded his hands and placed them flat on his knees, recalculating. I've treated 23 cases over 9 years, he said. His voice was different now, not defensive. Explanatory. The voice of a doctor justifying a controversial procedure. Each one addressed a specific imbalance. Each one was documented, measured, followed up. Do you know what the regional stability index was before I started? Do you know how many uncontrolled snapbacks were happening annually in the Northeast Corridor? I know how many people you killed. 5. Over 9 years. In a region that was losing 12 to 15 annually from unmanaged placements before I intervened. He said it like a balance sheet, debits and credits. I reduced the mortality rate. I stabilized a system that was hemorrhaging. Everything I did because the alternative was worse. Tell that to Michael Reeves. Michael Reeves would have died regardless. The ledger was going to balance. I chose when and how. That's not murder. That's triage. Derek made a sound. Not a word. Something lower. More animal. The kind of sound that precedes either violence or the supreme effort of not committing it. What do you want? Rhodes asked. Directed at me. He'd written Derek off. A variable he'd already processed and filed. A list of every active placement. Every case currently in motion. Every adjuster under your pressure. Names, targets, status. I stood over him. Close enough to touch. Because when your credentials freeze, those placements don't just stop. They rebound. And I want to know who gets hurt. And if I provide this information, then the judge acts cleanly and nobody else dies. And if I don't, Derek answered from behind me, then I provide it. From your files. Without your cooperation. And the judge gets the unfiltered version, including the 2 entries marked terminated. Rhodes looked from me to Derek and back. The calculation was running fast. There are 11 active cases, he said finally. 3 in Ashford. 8 distributed across the northeast corridor. Eddie, drifting near the painted-over windows, went very still. Names, I said. Rhodes reached for his briefcase. Chapter 4. Cauterize. The briefcase opened with 2 precise clicks. Rhodes pulled out a leather notebook, the kind with a magnetic clasp and pages of graph paper. His handwriting was small, neat, physician precise. He was halfway through the first name when he stopped. The air changed. Temperature dropped. The gray space frequency spiked hard enough that the radio in my pocket crackled, and Eddie's form went sharp at the edges. Rhodes heard it too. His head came up, and for the first time, something crossed his face that wasn't calculation. Recognition. You. He wasn't looking at my face. He was looking through it. I felt this when you touched me in that parking garage. I've been researching since. His voice went flat. Clinical. You've torn a hole in the ledger. You're carrying it inside you. And yet, I'm still standing. The anomalies in this region have tripled in 5 years. Entity manifestations. Snapbacks. Drift patterns that break every model. He stood up. The folding chair scraped concrete. You're a wound in the balance of this city, Vance. Funny. Leland said something similar. The name hit him. Leland. Bellamy. His jaw tightened. Catherine Leland studies the problem. Rhodes recovered fast. I treat it. Treat. Derek's voice came from behind me. Is that what you did to Michael Reeves? Triage. When a system is sick, you cauterize. Rhodes's right hand curled at his side. Casual. Except heat was building in his palm. I could feel it through the ledger the way you feel a stove from across a room. Sam, Eddie said, his signature just changed. That's not a stored cost. He's pulling. From the building, the ground, everything. Rhodes moved. Toward Derek. Fast. Too fast for 65. 2 strides, and his hand locked around Derek's forearm. Derek twisted. Couldn't break it. The pull hit. I felt it through the ledger. Suction. Life draining out of Derek through skin contact. Not a cost transfer. Worse. Rhodes was treating a living man's vitality as a commodity. Extractable. Movable. The warehouse air thinned around them. The fluorescent tube above the loading dock, the only light in the building, flickered and buzzed. Derek's face went gray. Seconds. Color leaving like water through a cracked vessel. His knees buckled. One hit concrete. The sound was loud in the empty warehouse. Bone on stone. He was still trying to break the grip, but his hands weren't working anymore. Fingers loosening. Strength draining through the contact point like heat through an open window. Sam? Eddie's voice. Sharp. He's pulling years, not hours. Years. Rhodes didn't blink. Same expression as his personnel photo. Maintenance. I hit him. Shoulder. Full weight. The impact broke the contact and sent Rhodes sideways. He caught himself on a support beam. I went to my knees from the momentum, hands on cold concrete, and behind me, Derek collapsed forward, both palms on the floor, breathing in gasps that sounded like a man surfacing from deep water. The fluorescent tube steadied. The warehouse settled, but the air still felt thin, like something had been taken from the room itself. Rhodes turned. His eyes were bright, vital. He looked 10 years younger. The stolen vitality was already integrating, making him faster, filling spaces that age had been slowly emptying for decades. The Bureau banned this technique in 1952, Rhodes said, straightened his jacket. I unsealed the research. Vitality extraction. Simple, elegant, just adjusting in reverse. He circled. Light on his feet. Not running. Repositioning. You're the biggest infection I've found in 9 years of cutting, Vance. Derek. I didn't look away from Rhodes. How bad? Still here. Thin. Wrecked. Legs won't work. Give me a minute. Rhodes lunged. Chapter 5. The Ocean. Rhodes got both hands on my arms. Contact. Pull. Different from Derek. Stronger. He reached through the conduit for my vitality, my life, the fundamental energy that kept a body running. He found the gray space instead. The warehouse floor was still under my feet, concrete, cold, the hum of the radio in my pocket spiking to a whine. The fluorescent tube overhead strobing, throwing the room into alternating flashes of light and shadow, but layered over everything, visible for the first time, the ocean. No bottom, no edges. Full. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Old griefs, orphaned costs, debts that had outlived every person involved. They moved like deep water currents. Slow, patient, all oriented the same direction. Toward the surface. Toward Eddie. Toward the tier I'd made 7 years ago. And they had faces. Not clear. Not defined, but present. A woman's profile turning toward light that wasn't there. Hands reaching for things they'd lost before the century turned. They weren't ghosts. They weren't people. They were the residue of lives the ledger had charged and never balanced, and they'd been drifting longer than the cemetery at Elmwood. Rhodes felt them. His pull reversed. Not by choice. The gray space pushed back. Old costs surged through the conduit he'd opened and poured into him like water through a cracked dam. He screamed. Short. Raw. Not pain. Horror. A man who'd reduced suffering to case numbers, suddenly drowning in all of it at once. Every grief. Every loss. Every cost that had drifted in the dark with no one to know it. His hands released. He staggered. Fell. Hit concrete. The sound was loud in the empty warehouse, bone on stone. And then he was curling inward, arms around his chest, trying to hold himself together against a flood already inside him. The gray space settled. The ocean pulled back. Warehouse. Concrete dust. Cold air. The radio crackling down from its whine to a hum. But something had changed. The gray space was wider. Not by much. The difference between a closed door and one that's ajar. The presences were closer to the surface, pressing against something that used to be solid. Eddie stood in the center of the room, not flickering, solid. Every edge sharp, every detail defined. The most real he'd been in 7 years. Eddie. He didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on a point above Rhodes's crumpled form, listening. They're right there, he said. Quiet. Right at the surface. I can see them. Not impressions. Faces. Hands. He looked at me. The voice is speaking. Rhodes moaned on the floor. Derek was pulling himself up by a support beam, color slowly returning, watching Rhodes with nothing soft in his expression. What's it saying? Eddie closed his eyes. His form brightened. The radio crackled once. Sharp. Clear. Then a sound like wind through a space too large to measure. Later. He opened his eyes. Something had shifted in them. Deal with him first. Rhodes was conscious. His body was fine. The stolen vitality was still in him, but his eyes were empty. The accumulated grief of hundreds of lost souls had poured through him and shattered the certainty that had been his foundation for 23 years. He wasn't calculating anymore. The boy, Rhodes whispered. The boy was afraid. He didn't understand what was happening to him. Derek crossed the floor, stood over him. Yeah, Derek said. He was. Derek turned away, put both hands flat on the brick wall, and stood there, breathing. I knelt beside Rhodes. Cracked glasses, dusty suit. 11 active cases, I said. I still need those names. His eyes focused, slowly. Notebook, he said. Inside pocket. I found it. 11 names. 11 cases. 11 people still caught in the machine that was about to stop running. We should go, Eddie said. Solid. Present. The sharpest version of himself I'd ever seen. I pocketed the notebook. Left Rhodes on the floor. The man who'd slept 8 hours every night for 23 years was going to have a different kind of night. Derek was at the loading dock. His color was better. Not good. He was leaning against the brick, both hands flat on the wall. The kind of posture that says a man's legs are working, but he doesn't trust them yet. I jumped the timeline, he said. Yeah, I'd do it again. I know. He looked at his hands, turned them over. What he did, I felt myself leaving, not pain, like being poured out through a crack I couldn't find. He closed his fists. That's how the terminated ones died. No marks, no evidence, just a handshake that leaves you empty. We stood there. The rail yard hummed. The parking lot smelled like diesel in February. Go home, I said. Let the vitality rebuild. I'll call when Voss moves. 3 in Ashford, Sam. He pushed off the wall. 3 people in this city waking up tomorrow to a debt that's about to lose its leash. I've got the notebook. We move as soon as the judge gives the word. Derek nodded. Got in his truck. Pulled out slow. Careful. The way a man drives when he's not sure his reflexes are where they should be. The taillights disappeared around the corner. I stood in the empty lot. Eddie beside me. Rhodes behind us in the warehouse, lying on the concrete floor, experiencing the full weight of a career he'd called maintenance. You could have killed him, Eddie said. Not a question. The gray space could have. I didn't choose it. Next time you might. Eddie's voice was flat. The observation of a dead man who'd seen plenty of living ones make choices they couldn't take back. The ocean didn't ask your permission. It just moved. What happens when you learn to move it yourself? I don't know. Neither do I. And that's the first honest answer either of us has given about this in months. I got in the Taurus. Eddie came through the passenger door. The radio was humming louder now, the frequency that had been building all day reaching something close to a sustained note, the kind of note that wanted to become a chord. The drive back to Ashford took 40 minutes. Neither of us spoke. The highway unwound beneath us, dark and empty, the Taurus finding third gear for once without complaint. Somewhere inside me, the ocean settled, deeper, quieter, like water returning to still after a stone had been thrown. Chapter 6. What comes next? Dawn came to Ashford the way it always did. Gradually, grudgingly. I sat in the Taurus behind my building, engine off, watching the sky turn from black to gray. I called April. Voss needs active case analysis before she'll move. I have the names. 11 cases. Rhodes gave them up. Voluntarily? After some persuasion. She was quiet for a moment. Send me the names. Miriam's thumb drive has enough current data to build the framework. 24 hours. I sent her photos of the notebook pages. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Dead drop 3. Check it. M. Miriam. The dead drop was an old mailbox on Birch, 3 blocks from the library we'd burned as a communication point. The mailbox hadn't held actual mail in a decade. Paint peeling, hinge rusted open. Nobody looked at it twice, which was the point. Inside, a folded note in Miriam's precise handwriting and a USB drive. The drive was warm. She'd been holding it. The note was short. Silver Honda, Federal. A DOJ inspector named Caruso, running an independent investigation into Bureau field operations, broader scope than Rhodes. 8 months of quiet surveillance, and his findings extended beyond Ashford. Northeast Corridor. The network we'd been mapping was a branch, not the tree. She was safe, moving daily, would check signals. At the bottom, in smaller writing, his files make ours look like a rough draft. Eddie read it twice. The Honda was federal. Leland's been watching the Bureau for 9 years, and she missed a DOJ investigation running for 8 months under her nose. Leland watches the ledger. This guy watches the money. I folded the note and put it in my jacket. 2 different languages, 2 different investigations. Neither one knew about the other. Until Miriam. She'd gone from hunting me to helping me to living out of her car. Now she was the only thread connecting a DOJ inspector, a retired judge, and a team of off-books adjusters. Anyone else, I'd have worried about the pressure. But Miriam Tate had been born for pressure. She just hadn't known it until the Bureau tried to crush her with it. I called Marcus. The silence after I read him, the note lasted 5 full seconds. Marcus' silence. The kind that meant maps were being redrawn. "This is bigger than Ashford," Marcus said. "And we're not done with Ashford yet." A long breath. Not a sigh. Marcus didn't sigh. A recalibration. If the inspector's files make ours look like a rough draft, he's found the other branches. Other cities. Other versions of roads. Or maybe Leland is the only one. Maybe. But I doubt it. Systems this organized don't depend on a single architect. A pause. Derek? Recovering. Rhodes used vitality extraction on him. That was banned in 52. Rhodes unsealed the research. Of course he did. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Samuel. The gray space reaction you described. The way it pushed back through the conduit. A pause. That's not passive absorption. Something inside you decided to fight. I know. If it can push centuries of grief through a forced conduit, it can push other things. Targeted things. Yeah, I heard you. Good. He hung up. I sat in the Taurus. February sun, weak and cold. The radio hummed. The frequency was different this morning. Layered. Richer. Eddie sat in the passenger seat. Solid. The most present he'd been in 7 years. His form didn't flicker. His edges were clean. Even the collar of his jacket had definition, individual threads visible for the first time since he died wearing it. The voice, I said. Yeah, he turned to face me. The radio hummed between us, the frequency richer than it had been this morning, layered, like a chord resolving into something the ear almost recognized. When Rhodes opened the conduit and the ocean pushed back, I saw them. Not impressions. Faces. Hundreds. People who became costs and forgot they had names. His voice was flat, controlled. They poured through Rhodes because he was stupid enough to open the door. They weren't interested in him. What did they want? To be known, that's all. He looked at his own hands, at the solidity of them. One of them was a woman. Flour-dusted hands and a grief so old it felt like weather. She looked at me, and I got the whole weight of her life in one hit. And the voice? Eddie looked at me. Long. The longest look since the day he'd appeared in my office, translucent and furious. It said thank you. To you. He paused. For making the tier. For giving them somewhere to exist without being forced to balance. You ripped a hole in reality, and the hole became a shelter. The parking lot was quiet. The Taurus idled. You're welcome, I said. Eddie almost smiled. The dry kind. Don't get sentimental. We've got 11 active cases, the inspector's federal investigation, and a scientist who doesn't know we just turned her weapon into a wildlife preserve. Leland. She's going to want to know what the gray space did to Rhodes, and when she finds out, she'll either want to use it or destroy it. Yeah. So what's the play? I started the engine. The Taurus complained about first gear. The dashboard rattle found its rhythm. The radio hummed a frequency that was almost almost music. Same as always, I said. We do the work. We pay the costs. We figure out the rest as we go. Eddie nodded. Terrible plan. Best one I've got. I pulled out of the parking lot. The city stretched out around us, gray and cold and full of people who had no idea what moved underneath the world they knew. 11 names in a dead man's notebook. A federal investigation about to blow the doors open. A judge in Briarfield reading 43 pages. And underneath it all, an ocean that had just learned how to speak. Whatever came next was going to be louder.